In the year 2019, on a stage shrouded in mystery, an imposing figure stepped out of his car and walked from the parking lot toward a colossal building. His suit and tie attire projected the image of someone destined to occupy a prominent place in the intricate corridors of some business or governmental entity, and so it was indeed Dom Gustavo Martins, an essential figure in a private banking institution. His residence was situated in one of the residential complexes of the metropolis, where, although there were no ostentatious luxuries, his life unfolded with enviable comfort. This particular day, April 14, 2019, held a special significance for Dom Gustavo, marking the 15th anniversary of his marital union, a milestone that conferred a palpable aura of happiness. His wife and children, the pillars of his existence, completed a picture of a fulfilled life. With emotion, he decided to leave the office earlier than usual, eager to celebrate with his family. Around 3 p.m., Gustavo left the financial institution with a firm nod, recalling the upcoming union. However, just 3 blocks from his home, he decided to stop at a store not only to buy fresh roses but also to pick out an exquisite cake. That would be the highlight of the celebration approaching for his wife and children. The air vibrated with an unusual anticipation, as if destiny itself were weaving the threads of a mystery about to be revealed. As he exited the store with his hands full of roses and a carefully chosen cake, the expression of joy on Gustavo's face was suddenly eclipsed by the hurried and somber pace of an ambulance. A knot of worry formed in his stomach, and uncertainty clouded his mind. What urgent event could trigger such a mobilization of emergency services? He quickly got into his vehicle, crossing the gate of the residential area with growing anxiety. The entrance guard, with a look heavy with sadness, said not a word, but Gustavo detected a strange aura in his expression. Without stopping to unravel the puzzle, he sped his car as if a visceral instinct propelled him. He was certain that something terrifying was happening at his home. Upon reaching his street, the imposing presence of the ambulance parked in front of his house left Gustavo breathless. His heart took a violent turn, and an unfathomable fear enveloped him. He got out of the vehicle and ran to the house, shouting his wife's name. The scene that unfolded before his eyes was a nightmare come true. His wife lay on a stretcher, covered in a body bag. Paramedics tried to stop him, but his determination knew no bounds. With a shove, he pushed aside the rescuers and retrieved the bag in a desperate act to confirm the cruel reality. His children, drowned in a sea of uncontrollable tears, were silent witnesses to the pain that consumed them. The paramedics, with sorrowful voices, informed Gustavo that his wife had suffered a massive heart attack, and when they arrived, there was no hope of resuscitating her. They lifted a devastated Gustavo from the ground and proceeded to transfer the lifeless body of the lady to the morgue, leaving behind a trail of anguish and despair in the house that until recently echoed with laughter and joy of a united family. Gustavo, torn apart by grief, fell to his knees, directing his gaze to the sky as he uttered a painful farewell. "Daddy, what will we do now that Mommy is no longer with us?" 7 days had passed since the burial of Gustavo's wife, and this period symbolized the time he spent secluded in his room, a room that became his refuge of despair and sorrow. His children, distressed with concern, tried to break the oppressive silence, bringing him food. However, Gustavo's resistance was firm. Any attempt at relief was met with fury, and he screamed at them to leave, refusing to see anyone. Gustavo's isolation was a deep abyss where alcohol became his only solace. In the shadows of his room, empty bottles witnessed his descent into a self-destructive spiral. His children, on the brink of despair, tried to reason with him. "Daddy, you can't starve yourself," they pleaded, trying to break the chains that kept him a prisoner of his own pain. "Come out of the room, you'll lose your job, you'll lose us," they added, hoping to rescue their father from the abyss in which he found himself. Upon hearing these words, Gustavo, as if awakening from a stupor, staggered out of his room. His lost gaze and eyes reddened by excess alcohol expressed the desperation of a man who had lost all sense of purpose. "Leave, all of you, leave me alone, I don't want to see anyone," he exclaimed bitterly, expelling those who loved him most from his presence. His children, unable to bear the helplessness they felt, were forced to leave their father. Gustavo, sunk in a terrible spiral of alcoholism, lost everything. The house and the car that once witnessed happy days were auctioned off by the same bank to which he dedicated years of his life. Now completely homeless, Gustavo wandered aimlessly, sleeping where he could and feeding on the hopelessness that the street offered him in the form of garbage. The tragedy of his life became a pervasive shadow, obscuring any vestige of hope that may have remained in his shattered heart. Gustavo, a shadow of what he once was, now found himself in the grim reality of homelessness, where hope vanished day by day, his existence reduced to a daily struggle for survival, with the only certainty being that death would one day come to liberate him from his misfortune. 1 year after losing everything, 2 young men wandered the street where Gustavo, now a recognized beggar by all, lay on a piece of cardboard, seeking refuge in any corner of the merciless city. "Hey, look at that bum over there. He spends all day sleeping and our taxes are a burden to the country," disdainfully commented one of the young men as he spat at Gustavo. The other, nodding with disdain, added, "My father says he knows him. He used to be a worker at the National Bank and now he's like this, after his wife's death. It seems he fell into alcoholism and ended up on the street. His kids abandoned him. That happened because he's lazy, weak, and cowardly." As the young men murmured criticisms from their privileged position of youth, Gustavo watched them with hungry eyes, not only for food but also for understanding and empathy. However, instead, the insensitive young men decided to throw at him the leftovers of 2 hamburgers they were devouring. Humiliation fell upon Gustavo like a heavy cloak, but his dignity-filled gaze did not break. The young men, indifferent to the suffering their act inflicted, continued on their way, leaving behind a man who was once respected and who now lay in the shadow of the street, stripped of everything except his story of downfall and despair. In the bustling urban setting, the echo of disapproval resonated toward Gustavo, who lay vulnerable in the corner of a busy street. "Go work and wash yourself, you stink," someone spat from the crowd. Disapproval continued as one of the boys, in an attempt to avoid any possible contamination by Gustavo's odor, advised his friends, "Don't go, you can take the smell of that scoundrel, remember that today we're going out to eat with some girls." Unaware of Gustavo's humanity, the youths, in their bubble of privilege, continued their conversation, deciding to put into practice their indifference and disdain, without realizing that their actions would have unexpected consequences. As they drifted away in a common distraction among friends, one of them dropped his wallet, unaware that his negligence was on Gustavo's radar. The latter, in his state of physical and emotional fragility, watched the scene closely. The wallet, like a glimmer of opportunity in the darkness of his reality, was just a few meters away from him. He tried to get the attention of the youths by raising his hands and signaling, but his efforts were in vain, ignored once again, sinking Gustavo into frustration. Defying his own weakness, Gustavo stood up, with the effort of the cardboard serving as his bed. His sick body barely supported his weight, but the possibility of changing his fate infused him with unexpected determination. Crawling, he almost reached the forgotten wallet. Upon reviewing its contents, he discovered not only money but also important documents. Despite his deteriorated physical condition, the decency and integrity that once characterized Gustavo manifested with the desire to correct the injustice looming over the oblivious youths. He resolved to return the wallet, step by step retracing the path they had taken, willing to face once again the indifference that had marked his existence. The immutable and capricious destiny was woven in the streets, where Gustavo's redemption was at stake. Gustavo's struggle against adversities took an even more challenging turn when, motivated by the ethics he had cultivated since childhood, he decided to return the forgotten wallet. However, the hunger in his stomach and the weakness prevented him from advancing much. A severe infection in one of his feet added an agonizing component to his situation, making each step an odyssey of suffering. Gustavo's determination, however, did not waver, pleading for mercy. After a frustrated attempt to move forward, Gustavo was forced to return to his likely refuge, the cardboard that offered minimal solace amidst his misfortune. He lay down with the weight of fatigue and hopelessness, hoping that the night would bring relief and perhaps some fleeting dream to distract him from this cruel reality. Half an hour later, his eyes lifted in surprise as he glimpsed from a distance the same two youths who had humiliated him and inadvertently dropped the wallet. Despite the hunger gnawing at him and the illnesses afflicting him, Gustavo, moved by an innate sense of righteousness, made the decision to return the lost object. Although his body screamed to give up, Gustavo rose with determination, waving to the youths who, ignoring his presence, continued their distracted search down the street. "Hey, guys, over here," exclaimed Gustavo, waving his hand in an attempt to get their attention. The youths, immersed in their own reality, initially tried to ignore him. However, one of them noticed that in one of Gustavo's hands, there was something resembling their lost wallet. The scene became increasingly tense, with Gustavo's conscience facing the apparent disinterest of the youths. However, this act of integrity amidst his own tragedy stood as an unexpected lesson on the persistence of honor. Even in the most desperate circumstances, the street amidst the city's chaotic routine witnessed an unexpected turn when Ramiro and his friend noticed something familiar in the hands of the beggar they had previously scorned. "Look, Ramiro, it looks like your wallet," signaled the friend, whispering, with a flash of understanding. The youths approached quickly, curiosity mixed with tangible hope in the air. The beggar they had insulted and humiliated held the wallet with a calmness that defied logic. "You didn't know, did you?" The beggar's words resonated like an echo of irony, challenging the youth's superficial perception of him. In the face of Ramiro and his friend's inquisitive gaze, the beggar, now identified as Gustavo Martins, continued his response, revealing the truth behind the situation. "It fell while you were walking." The revelation left the youths bewildered, trying to connect the dots in half surprise. "You didn't touch anything, did you?" inquired Ramiro, still assimilating the reality unfolding before him. The beggar's response resounded with unexpected dignity. "I didn't touch anything, I'm a beggar, not a thief." Gustavo's words, spoken with firmness and conviction, echoed in the street, challenging the disdainful label the youths had mercilessly assigned to him. The scene took an unexpected turn when Ramiro and his friend, with a mixture of surprise and reluctance, decided to check the wallet. Disbelief painted their faces as they observed that, against all expectations, all the money was intact. The beggar here, whom they had scorned, offended, and humiliated, hadn't touched a single penny, The irony of the situation left the youths in an uncomfortable silence, confronting the poignant lesson that life had presented to them at that moment. Gustavo's dignity, shining amidst adversity, left a lasting impression on the conscience of those who had underestimated him. The two youths, sunk in shame and remorse for their past actions, approached the beggar with a sincere expression of repentance. "We apologize for our terrible behavior. It's no problem. Now I understand that you only see a beggar," replied the man with humility resonating in the air. Ramiro, trying to make amends, "I'm Ramiro and he's my friend Fernando." At that moment, the beggar, now identified as Gustavo Martins, responded calmly, "And you, what's your name?" "My name is Gustavo Martins. My father says he knew you, that you worked at the central bank." The mention of the central bank triggered a surprising connection between them. Gustavo, in his debilitated appearance, was a shadow of the person he once was. "It was a long time ago," he whispered nostalgically, revealing traces of a life that had been left behind. With confidence placed in the fragile bridge of memory, Gustavo shared the pain that had marked his experience since his wife died. "I lost everything. I let myself be carried away by grief, friend." The beggar's revelation resonated in the air, leaving the youths in a state of shock and sympathy. Ramiro, feeling the urgency to make amends, declared with resolution, "Don't worry, we'll help you." The honesty and dignity shown by Gustavo amidst adversity awakened a genuine desire for redemption in the youths. "Your display of honesty tells me it's worth helping you," added Ramiro, determined to be part of the impending change. The scene, imbued with a new understanding and empathy, marked the beginning of an opportunity for Gustavo to overcome the shadows of his past. The generous gesture of the young men had an effect, and Gustavo, grateful yet still hesitant, expressed his uncertainty. "Thank you, but I'm not sure how you could help me." However, Ramiro, with a gentle determination, insisted, "Get up. Let's grab something to eat first." The young men approached Gustavo, reaching out to help him up, and together they headed to a fast food kiosk. On the way to the place, Gustavo felt grateful but also somewhat embarrassed, aware that his appearance marked by indigence was a subject of conversation among other customers who didn't know him. However, the young men, with a determined attitude, paid no heed to the stares of others and focused on providing Gustavo a moment of relief and well-being. Upon reaching the fast food kiosk, the young men bought a meal for each of them and sodas to accompany. Despite his initial reservation, Gustavo felt content after satisfying his hunger. Gustavo expressed the desire to bid farewell, considering that the invitation for the meal and the sodas were sufficient. However, the young men, grateful for the kindness shown and aware of Gustavo's difficult situation, decided to explain their plan in a gesture of solidarity. Ramiro shared, "My father knows how difficult it is to help someone off the streets." The young men, determined to make a difference, offered Gustavo the opportunity to leave street life behind. They left the restaurant and entered a store to purchase suitable and decent clothes for Gustavo, aiming to change the perception others might have of him. After buying clothes, they made a call and booked a small room for Gustavo to freshen up and change clothes. The scene, marked by empathy and hope, opened a door to a new chapter in Gustavo's life, thanks to the kindness and commitment of these young men who decided to make a difference in the life of someone who had fallen into society's deepest crevices. Weeks later, Gustavo Martins returned to a dignified life, leaving behind the shadows of the street. He accepted the help offered by Dom Carlos and integrated into the workforce of the factory. His days began to involve controlling and recording merchandise, as well as managing billing processes for customers. Gustavo felt satisfied and content, experiencing a sense of renewal in this new chapter of his life. He appreciated the opportunity for redemption and personal growth, feeling that somehow his long-unheard desires were now being fulfilled in a greater way. The spiral of despair had been replaced by a ladder of opportunities, and Gustavo, grateful for the generosity offered to him, was determined to seize this second chance that life provided him. One afternoon, while still immersed in work at Dom Carlos's factory, the journey took an unexpected turn. Gustavo received a call that would change his destiny. The voice on the other end of the phone was from the manager of the central bank, bringing news of a job offer. Dom Carlos, more than a local businessman, was an important client of the central bank and maintained a close friendship with the manager. Gustavo, who had lost his job at the central bank due to challenges caused by depression and sadness, now saw an opportunity to regain his former position with great joy. Gustavo accepted the offer, internally thanking the sequence of events that had led him to this point. The manager's call not only brought a job opportunity but also sincere recognition and congratulations from Dom Carlos. Gustavo, now overwhelmed with gratitude, spoke with Dom Carlos to express his thanks. Dom Carlos, in turn, congratulated Gustavo on his deserved achievement and wished him total success in the new stage ahead. This expected turn in Gustavo's life not only marked a return to his professional career but also showed how perseverance, honesty, and a positive attitude can open doors that seem closed. Gustavo's life, now filled with even sweeter surprises, 1 year after the events that transformed his destiny, not only found stability in work and regained his position at the central bank, but life held even more rewarding surprises. Gustavo remarried, finding in his new partner an emotional support that helped him overcome the shadows of the past. With a renewed heart, Gustavo also regained his car and his house, tangible symbols of the rebuilding of his life. The resilience he demonstrated during his time on the streets and at Dom Carlos's factory translated into a complete restoration of the pieces of his life that once seemed lost. His children, who had abandoned him in the past, returned seeking forgiveness. Gustavo, now imbued with wisdom and understanding, welcomed them with love and extended his forgiveness. The once fractured family became a stronger and more united fabric than ever before. Forgiveness and understanding, fundamental pillars of Gustavo's life philosophy, were a cornerstone of the reconstruction of his relationships. In his reflections, Gustavo repeated with conviction, "Honesty is a tree that will always bear fruit." He experienced firsthand how integrity, resilience, and a positive attitude reaped lasting rewards. His life, once marked by adversity and loss, became a living testimony of how internal change can manifest in remarkable external transformations. The man who was once immersed in the darkness of depression and sadness was now a reflection of renewal and hope. Through his experiences, Dom Gustavo became a beacon of inspiration for those who, like him, faced difficult times. His story not only spoke of second chances but also of the human capacity for redemption and the rebuilding of a brighter future. Looking back, Gustavo understood that honesty and resilience were the seeds he planted in his life, which, despite storms, sprouted and blossomed unexpectedly. The reconciled family, the forgiveness given and received, the renewed work opportunity, all testified that second chances are not only possible but transformative. Gustavo never ceased to repeat, "Honesty is a tree that will always bear fruit." His life embodied this truth, showing that even in the darkest moments, integrity is a light that illuminates the path to a new dawn. His story left in the air a reflective question: how many lives could we change if we chose to be honest, even when it seemed easier to remain silent? His experiences also raised another profound question. How much power does forgiveness have to heal seemingly incurable wounds and restore broken relationships? Dom Gustavo, with his open heart, showed that forgiveness is not only a virtue but also a bridge to reconciliation and inner peace. As we close this poignant chapter, we are left with a reflection on our own lives. What seeds are we planting today, and what will we reap tomorrow? Are we willing to embrace honesty, resilience, and forgiveness as guides for our own journey? The story of Dom Carlos Martinez assures us that even in the most heart-wrenching narrative, there is always room for rebirth, the blossoming of hope, and the eternal growth of the tree of honesty, whose fruits endure beyond seasons and leave a remarkable legacy in the fabric of human existence. My friends, we have reached the end of our story. We ask that if you are not already subscribed to our channel, please subscribe, share, and leave a like. The video appearing on your screen now will also surely touch you. Enjoy the session, and until the next video.